Ginger, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. That means you can hear me.
Oh, I can hear you just fine. I mean, it ain't like you're across the seas or anything.
I know. Isn't technology amazing?
Well, I thank you today for taking the time today to talk to me about your new book, Memoirs of the Bright Side of the Moon. And for those who aren't too familiar, you were married to this guitar player called David Gilmour from Pink Floyd.
Yes, I was 20 years. No, actually 19.
Just a phenomenal guitar player. I mean, one of the anyone big like that who came out in the 70s is just a rock legend,
Mm-hmm.
After reading your book, I mean, what I enjoyed, Ginger, is that it's not just filled with dirt about Pink Floyd. I mean, there's very little, actually. It is just a book that details everything that happened from your perspective around the band and so forth, and your life as a wife and mother and rock and roll wife.
Mm-hmm.
When I was growing up, Dave's techniques really led me to take interest in the guitar, and I just love how you detail in some of your stories. You just paint a really good picture of what it was like watching him perform with the Floyd every night and throughout his solo career. After all the years on tour with David and watching him and the band perform, I know that you did mention watching him from home during the Live 8 concert. What was that like for you?
Yeah. It was like the completion of a cycle in some ways. I was home, sitting in front of the television. My children were in the audience, and they were texting me.
Oh, wow.
every moment telling me what was going on. And I was praying that David and Roger would forgive each other and allow the creative moment that they're so good at having done come forth. Because the joy in the audience of all the people, their expectation, they were just so, wow, we've waited all this time, and it was, 24 years maybe?
Sure, just about that, yeah.
And certainly we had gone through all of that conflict that the band went through in their divorce, which also affected all of the home lives. It was quite something for all those years from the wall when Rick had to leave, all that conflict going on and on and on through the film, through the final cut and on through the court cases and stuff, for them to come together, for me was probably on the subtle level the most amazing thing to give as a gift to humanity, not just for them to come together and play together, but to actually, it gives me tingles, to have forgiven each other and allowed the beauty of the music to come forth beyond human conflict. That for me is a huge present, and probably not many people. I had to say it because it's like they forgave each other. I was in the kitchen going, come on guys, let go, let go, let go. Be what you were when you wrote that music.
Yeah.
And when Comfortably Numb happened, that's what they did.
It was incredible to witness from my perspective as well. As I mentioned, I grew up listening to Pink Floyd all the time and just trying to emulate David's guitars, and knowing how serious the guys took the music, especially Roger, and for things to go bad for so long. I mean, man, just for them 3 or 4 songs, just to have that back was a moment in time.
It was, yes. More so than just them coming together, as I said.
Absolutely. Just out of curiosity, do you follow David's new music, his latest stuff with Pink Floyd, The Endless River, and his new album, Rattle That Lock?
I have listened to it. I have my opinions, which I don't really want to talk about.
Okay, understood. And just from my perspective, it's just good to see artists just continue. They're creative vials for their thoughts, and it's just nice to see them continue like that, as Roger has as well.
If you remember that there was a moment that we were in New York and I met with Werner Engel. And
Yes.
he had said to me that Carl Jung has written one of his books called Art and the Unconscious, and that it is so important for an artist to constantly connect. I personally believe that it's important for every person because every person has a creative connection to their soul. And it is through creativity in whatever way is your way that opens that. And it's at that point, David was resisting the word soul, but he is incredibly intuitive as a person. I have observed him. It's so special when a person touches that place. And that's what he did, and that's why no matter what, he needs to continue doing that.
Ginger, one of the things that really gave me chills was when you talk about during the wall tours, towards the end when David comes out on top of the wall and just starts playing those notes to Comfortably Numb. How you verbalize that is, it's just, I wish I was there, and after reading the book, I feel like I was there the way you portray that. I mean, that had to have been something special just, to be touched like that by music.
Every time. I mean, there's an essence when any art form touches God, so to speak, and is channeling heaven or channeling your soul or channeling beauty, whatever you want to call it. The magnificence of what we are as human beings. That's what an artist in its highest purpose will do for people. And it isn't that you sit there and say, wow, he's really a great artist. He's a great guitar player. He was, in that moment, he was more than that. He showed us that a human being can touch those realms of such beauty. And that's why those moments, because going through the hole-of-the-wall imagery and everything night after night, during some of those, even watching it being created, it was torture. And at times, because you need sometimes when you're so blinded by the hardship of life, that what we've created as people, and forgetting the beauty, sometimes you have to be knocked in the head, and that's what Roger did. To then you see the release when Comfortably Numb happened, and you are released from all of that angst is a special moment. And that song is incredible, what he achieved in that song. And there was a moment Roger didn't want it on the album.
When I read that, I couldn't believe that you state that in your book, that for a moment we may not have had that song. And I think that's a critical point.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Unbelievable. One of the things that I liked about the book is that there's a lot of people that you've met throughout touring with Floyd, coming out of Michigan, and you mentioned as a fairly shy young woman. How long did it take to feel comfortable touring with the band and being around, some of the guys you mentioned, Mick Jagger and George Harrison and Bob Geldof, even Andy Warhol and Stevie Wonder? How long did that take to just realize that was just a part of how it is now?
We were in love. It was so wonderfully in love and a dream come true for me that it was a new environment to be in. I traveled a lot with my stepdad in the Coast Guard from place to place.
Oh, okay.
It was a new environment, but it just didn't matter. I mean, plus their music was so awesome to me that I was just beginning to discover what an artist I was, and it just filled me. It was just really, it didn't take any adjusting. What did take adjusting was when he asked me to come back, and the fridges were the size of dishwashers.
Wow.
I couldn't, that was harder than anything. And the money, and the driving on the other side of the road, and there was no double glazing, so the wind would whistle through the iron lead windows, and that was more difficult. The new culture, I hadn't actually been out. English people speak English, but actually it's a different language. It's a totally different culture. That took a few years to get used to that. The rock and roll side was easy because the music was so wonderful.
I've been doing interviews now since 2011, and every time I meet somebody that I grew up listening to, I'm in awe that I am able to do so. And some of the stories that you mentioned, I mean, for instance, in Marrakesh, when you and David were walking through, and you said, "Hey, I think that's Mick Jagger over there," and David's like, "Yeah, that's Mick Jagger over there." And you guys didn't just pass by; you actually spent some time. That's surreal to me. That's just surreal.
In some ways, it is surreal to me too, because we've only ever knew those people through reading in books or seeing video clips and things. So there was an unreal side of it. You allow your heroes to develop in your mind and to actually see it. And he was just normal. Well, he's not normal, actually. He loved himself. He loved dancing and having the crowd paw him and things when he took us off to the discotheque.
Yeah.
But in his hotel suite, when David and he were sitting on the veranda playing acoustic guitars, it was just normal. I mean, I suppose it's one musician to another.
I understand. Sure. There's a really cool anecdote about Andy Warhol also, where you guys were having dinner and Andy talking. I had a chuckle out loud, Ginger. It was just funny the story you talk about having him coming up with an idea for men's brassieres that actually carried milk around, and that was a great story. Yeah, Pink Floyd. What a great story. And, that was one of the funnier ones. And one of the most touching ones for me was when you met Stevie Wonder. You were at that point pregnant, and he bent down and put his hand on your belly and was singing Isn't She Lovely? And that had to have been unbelievable.
And also it's so touching that it sparks in my heart with such happiness ever since, It's never leaves me, and I'm so happy to share it, because that was the thing about what became obvious while I was writing, because I was divinely inspired to do. I didn't know why, but by the end it was that there is the bright side. No matter what happens, life is challenging, but there is the bright side, and that is the purpose of the book. To take you into those journeys of experiences that you might have dreamed to have. And I take you there. I didn't know that would happen. Someone says I paint with words. And most people say they feel they were me in those situations. And what happens is that through the difficulty times that we went through, I have come out and emerged to be able to write this book, to say, I still feel the beauty of what we had. And I still find beauty every day in my life. No matter what mood I might wake up in, I work all day to make sure that I remember that joy and beauty is in every flower that's budding right now with the spring. Just look for it so that it counteracts the images of CNN that we are watching all the time.
And Ginger, I appreciate you stating that, because now that I think back to what I read in your book, it is a very positive book. I mean, like you said, even through the lawsuits and the band's divorce from each other, you still tell like a positive spin on a lot of it, and it's just a really inspiring book overall, I would say.
I'm happy to hear that. That's my life vision. That's my quest. And I've been through a lot of challenges, and I don't want to go down with the challenges. I want to live my life with joy, and it's there all the time for us to find it.
Growing up here just outside of Philadelphia, of course, when you mentioned the part about returning to Philadelphia, I mean, it was just great to hear. That's my hometown, Philly. And talking about the spectrum. I mean, talking about going to Philadelphia to see the family, and then going for the Animals concerts at Madison Square Garden. It's just unreal. Do you ever get back to Philadelphia?
Well, I did, but my father passed over about 8 years ago, and most of my relatives, uncles, grandparents, they've all passed on. And we have such a large family of cousins and things, I have no idea who they are anymore.
Wow.
And plus, with traveling and the family and living in the UK, I don't really get over there very much at all.
I'm sorry to hear that about your father, but you do mention a couple stories about him, and especially about just how he wasn't too familiar with Pink Floyd until his neighbors came to him and said, look, this is Pink Floyd. This is a big deal.
What's my daughter up to now? And the other very special thing is that when I was writing the book, I kept in contact with my stepmom, Agnes, and she told me a story that they had never told me, which I've put in the book, of how when they went to the concert and everything, how proud he was, and sitting in the audience and telling people that my daughter's married to him, and she said that she was amazed how much the audience knew the lyrics, and how much she enjoyed the evening. So, and that everyone treated them with such respect. They wound up coming to Paris as well for the Versailles concert.
Oh, wow.
And they really loved it in the end. He was well happy.
And a lot of the book talks about some of the travels that you've been while on tour with the band, and I feel like I've been to Morocco and to France and to Japan after reading your book. I mean, the things that you detail about the culture and just the time spent there is very impressive to me.
Thank you. A lot of people have commented in the same way. There's a woman I know very well, Nancy Ruth, who worked with the United Nations, and she's one of the people that gave me a what's it called?
A review of it, yeah.
A review,
Mm-hmm.
And it's in the book how she felt that she went on a tour around the world reading the book. She is one that does travel, and so it meant a lot to me for her to say that.
I can relate to not only Philadelphia, but you mentioned about spending some summers in Wildwood, down by the shore. And it was just awesome because, there was one part where you mentioned, I think it was your uncle that used to take you, and you can still remember just the little bings from the games on the boardwalk, and just those little details is what rings in my mind as well when I think about, again, summer's around the corner. I'm going to be going on down to Wildwood.
Yeah. Don't forget the cotton candy and all the ding-dings of all the little sounds and stuff. And at night, one of my, I didn't say this, I don't think, in the book, but one of my favorite sounds was the sound of the waves underneath the boardwalk.
Yes.
As you walked along, and that sort of slight dampness on your face,
It's peaceful. It's just peaceful walking along and just hearing the waves splashing and, seagulls in the back, and it's special. Before I let you go, I want to talk about Live Aid because when I just opened up the book, it opened right to the chapter about Live Aid, which I was enthralled by reading because you really had insight into, getting Bob Geldof to make this happen, didn't you?
Yeah, not many people know that. I did question how much I should say or not say, but I thought it was important.
And the concert itself, it was just phenomenal. I happened to be lucky enough, it was 3 days before my birthday. I was born July 16th, and I went to the show in '85, and one of the statements that you put in the book is that on that day, July 13th, 1985, music changed the world. And at that point, it may or may not seem it now, but at that time, you're absolutely right. Everyone, their ears perked up, their hearts opened, and they saw what was happening in Ethiopia.
Well, particularly the artists, the musicians and stuff, because what we went up against trying to do our concert people were very suspicious. And even George Harrison had said, David, don't let her do this, because he had such a bad time with the IRS and the HMRC over Bangladesh.
Yeah.
And it took over 8 to 9 years for any money to filter out after paying all those legal fees and everything, and the trauma, and it was like pulling teeth. And Geldof, he was certainly suited for it, where I was too soft. I'm really glad that he wound up doing it, because I can't say F-U-C-K as often as he does.
Yeah, I guess to make it happen, you have to kind of be stern, you know.
Yeah, well, he knew how to embarrass them and say, what the heck are you doing? How can you do this? These people need us. And if you look at what's happening with Syria right now, you know, we needed Geldof to get out there and say, what are you doing?
Sure.
Can you turn them back? How could you even suggest it? I mean, I saw a photograph someone had posted of all these people clamoring on this big boat and everything, and I thought, oh, it's the Syrians, what their problem is, what they're having. And it turned out to be Americans during the World War.
Oh, wow.
That, yeah, and it's like people forget. And the basis of my book is all about remembering beauty and God, because we're forgetting that element in us, by whatever name you call it. Because the moment you know and you touch that, you care. You care for your planet. You care for each other. You care for yourself and your family. You care. And you rejoice in the differences, because we all wind up in the same place when you live the majesty of life. And that's what that book's about.
I think that fans of Pink Floyd are going to love the book. I mean, the story is about photo shoot for the album cover for Animals, and the pig being detached from the moorings and flying off into some guy's field, and the Momentary Lapse of Reason tour, and David's tours on About Face. I mean, just, you detail a lot of stuff, so Floyd fans are going to love the book. I think, you know, people who travel are going to relate to the book in so many ways, and just people who are artistic and just, you know, like a good positive story are going to really like your book. So I appreciate you taking the time today to talk to me about your new book, Memoirs of the Bright Side of the Moon. And I wish you luck. And, you know, if you want to have Dave call me, have him call me.
I think that would be a real feat. But, John, thank you so much. It's an archetypal story, you know, that I'm really pleased that you want to spread it for us, because you're part of it, too.